You've been gaslit into believing that fighting back from withdrawal and other things would be easy. We
Ooh,
are your whistleblowing shrinks, Dr. Teralyn and Therapist Jenn, and this is the Gaslit Truth Podcast. Before
yeah,
we
it
start,
is.
one more shameless plug for my book,
Shameless
Your Best
self-promotion.
Brain. Shameless
Do it.
self-promotion, Your
Do
Best Brain. Yes, and I wanted to point out one of the chapters here because I think this is a chapter that jazzes me up the most because it's all about amino acids and neurotransmitters and things like
Ooh.
that. And these are the things that nobody taught you in school, nobody taught us in school,
Yep.
but have become so pivotal in our practice period. So this would be chapter 4. It's called Prepare to be Mind Blown. The mind is a source of all suffering, and it is also the source of all happiness. I love that quote because it is literally reclaiming your own agency with your mind. And then we talk a lot about neurotransmitters and amino acids, how to influence your neurotransmitters without psychiatric medication. Yay.
That's it. That's the
That's
ticket,
it.
people.
That's the
That's the
whole
ticket.
deal. If everybody
Mhm.
knew that before they started psych meds, I think the world would be a better place.
Oh man, if
There
that
you
would have
go.
only been the treatment plan, right? Here. Go
Correct.
ahead, Jen, and I want you to go look at like your serotonin. Maybe you need some
Right.
vitamin D. Maybe you
Yeah.
need some 5-HTP, damn it. Let's look
Right.
at that.
Yep.
And I
Or
would
maybe not.
probably
Maybe you don't need any of that stuff. Maybe you
yeah,
just need
or
to
yeah.
change your life. I
Yeah,
don't know.
maybe you need to
You
change
know?
your lifestyle a little. And
Yeah,
I would think our guest would agree today too that we've
I would
got on the
hope.
show. So we got to bring him in. Can you bring him in from the weight
I'm
room?
gonna bringing him in.
Bring him
Hello.
in.
Here he
Slide
is.
him in. There he is.
Hello.
There's Kevin.
Hi.
We've been following
Hi.
Kevin for a while over on TikTok.
Yeah.
His name is Kevin Gunderson. I was gonna say
It's not
I was gonna say the
Gustafson.
name of my financial advisor,
Oh
but
yeah,
this
let's
is
not
not
do
my
that.
financial advisor. Kevin Gunderson. Shout out. My financial advisor watches this. He's gonna get a kick out of that.
Oh
Anyway,
good.
we have a special guest, Kevin, and he's an advocate for fighting back. And he has a great story that I am glad that we've been wanting to get him on the show for a long time.
Yeah.
But because of mental health conditions and things like this, it's been really tough to get him here. So I'm glad that you're maybe feeling better. I don't know. Maybe you just felt obligated to be here. I don't know, but we're going to find out.
Maybe it was all the emails I keep sending going, hey,
Yeah, all
Maybe
the
Jen's just
emails.
persistent.
Kevin.
She's
I'm a
persistent.
tenacious little shit when it comes to stuff like this.
No, it wasn't that at all.
Oh,
Like you said, it was definitely it's been a struggle to even just function. So, yeah, I'm glad I'm here. I'm glad to finally meet you guys and to
Yeah.
talk about all this stuff that's been a struggle for a long time.
Yeah. So I think we just need to start from the beginning.
The beginning.
Let's jump
Yeah.
in, Kevin.
All right. Well, yeah. Like you want me to start from the beginning?
Sure. Well, let's start with the comment that you made off air
Yeah,
about
that's
the
it. Yeah.
gaslighting.
Mhm.
Because we were talking to him about what the hook for the show was going to be, and he mentioned other ways that he was gaslit, and I said, please save that for the show, and we'll start it off there. And so maybe if you can recall what you had said, otherwise we can prompt your memory a little bit on this, but maybe start there with how you were
I
gaslit.
think I mentioned. I think you said something about being gaslit about the withdrawal
Mhm.
from psychiatric drugs, and I said, well, my parents were also gaslit.
Yes.
Yes.
I know I've been asked many times over the years, and I'd like, do you blame your parents? Because I was put on at such a young age.
How old were you?
I believe I was 12.
Wow.
I was either 11 or 12. And people have asked me that, and I reply with the same answer. I say, I do not blame my parents at all. They were also gaslit, manipulated, whatever you want to call it, into believing that this was going to help me and that I needed this medication, and they are also victims. I truly believe that.
I believe that too. I
How-
just that hit me where it hurts actually
Yeah.
when you
Mhm.
said that.
Yeah. Tell us how it started, Kevin, with that. What was going on with you in your life that you and your parents got to that space of starting a psych med that young?
So the year was 2001, and I believe it was August of that year. And I've talked about some of this on my channel, on my videos, but I believe it was August 2001, and I had a really good friend at the time, and his sister passed away, and that was sort of like the start of just a bad year, to say the least. That was sixth grade for me, and I was going off to middle school for the first time. I had, learning disabilities that I was dealing with over the years, but I would say the start of her passing away was when things started to get really rough. And then I went right off to middle school, and I started to develop school anxiety. The teachers there were awful. Can I drop F-bombs on here? Is that a
Sure,
thing?
you can
Fuck
drop
no.
whatever
It
bombs
was
you want.
they were fucking awful.
Yes.
The teachers, they were just awful people, and there was a certain way that I needed to be taught, and I think I can speak for other people when I say that having learning disability can be difficult. It can be hard because not everyone understands why you have to learn a certain way, and you're made to believe sometimes that you're stupid or whatever, but it's not the case. And I think that my confidence just dipped that year because of the teachers, and because of the situations that I was in. So I started to get really bad school anxiety, and then it was like 9/11, and then only like 5 months after that my aunt passed away. So you had all these things happening that year that were really difficult, and my parents were kind of struggling to find a different school for me, because they were like, I don't think public school is going well at all for him, so let's try to find something else. And they did end up finding the perfect school for me. It's a private school in Fairfield, Connecticut. But I would say that year was the start of everything. And at some point, I know my memory is kind of, I have a great memory, but sometimes it gets a little lost. At some point during that year, they brought me to a doctor who my older sisters had both seen. And I'm not going to drop any names, but it was this specific doctor who basically said he needs to be on Celexa, and it's going to help him, and blah blah blah. So I think it was around March or April or May, sometime around there of 2002 is when I started antidepressants. And
Okay.
I believe that was the start. And I went up to about, I think I started at 10 milligrams, but then I was up around 20.
I will say I just read a thing on Celexa. I'm pretty sure it was Celexa as being one of the worst.
Yeah. It's
For
like,
not withdrawal, but side effects and things like that.
the side effects were brutal, yeah, for sure. And I know that Lexapro's like a newer version or whatever they want to call it.
Jen knows this. Yes. And I
Newer,
want to
less
address
side
something.
effects.
Well, I said you had mentioned like my memory is a little sketchy, and yes, my memory was a little sketchy during the time that I used psychiatric medications too. So that could have been one of the side effects for you. Just saying. Or you were 11, and I can't remember a lot about when I was 11 either. So
Yeah.
so from there though, what happened? Have you stayed on Celexa, or have you changed something?
Yeah, I mean, how much time do you have?
You switched several times, right? Till you got
times.
to your drug of
so
choice.
my current drug of choice, yeah. My current medication is Effexor. And I take a low dose of Klonopin daily. I don't want to be, but that is the current situation, and that will not continue to be the situation as I am trying to. It's weird. Benzos have never affected me the same as the SSRIs and the SNRIs. I've had a history with the benzos too, but I've always taken them as needed. Never really had a problem. But yeah, I'm getting off topic here, but I was on Celexa for 4 years, from 12 to 16. And during that time, that was actually when my panic attacks got really severe, when I was on the drug.
Mm-hmm.
I had more anxiety and depression when I was first put on the medication. But I think that when I actually started it is when the panic attacks got worse. But here's where the gaslighting comes in. You go to the doctor and you tell them, they say, okay, well, that just means you need a higher dose.
You need
Yes.
more.
Yep.
Yeah.
Or it's the wrong med. We need you on something different, or
Yeah.
a booster, or
So Kevin, your anxiety and your depression, you're saying it got worse after starting a medication, but the thing that really popped even more so was panic attacks, which you did
Yeah.
not have. So you're saying you did not have panic attacks prior to
I would
starting these meds.
say, if you want to call them panic attacks, I don't know if they were panic attacks. They weren't, like, before the medication. They were more. It was more just bad anxiety.
Right. Right.
And it was
Yeah.
school anxiety, and it wasn't
Normal anxiety.
It wasn't debilitating physical symptoms, which I deal with now.
Yeah.
It was more just like a constant state of just, I don't want to go to school, and the social aspect, and being afraid of the teachers, and all that stuff. But now it's just all physical manifestations, and whatever you want to call it, that have developed over the years.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, because every time we have a guest on here, like, you do retrospective things, especially when you talk about kids and all this stuff, like, the learning disability played such a huge role, I believe, in all of this, because it sounds like it wasn't addressed in a manner that was suitable for your learning. So of course you're going to enter into 6th grade anxious, because I'm going to guess that your learning wasn't up to par. And
Yeah.
and I say this because that's exactly what happened to my son. And so when he entered 6th grade, everything changes in 6th grade. Socially, it changes. What you're expected to know has changed. And so when you're struggling with a learning disability, there is, like, heightened anxiety and things like that. So I, knowing what I know now, I look at that and I think that seems expected. That seems like it would be a anticipated response with somebody who's going in with a learning disability, and going into 6th grade. Looking back on that now, what do you think about that kid self, going into 6th grade at 11, having some anxiety? What do you think you could tell him now, or what did you learn about him now?
Well, it's such a big jump, 5th to 6th, at least in Connecticut, that jump from elementary to middle school,
Mhm.
and just the way you go about your day, and the how you go from different, at least here, it's like you go to math and you have a different teacher for science, etc. But yeah, that whole process was just so different for me, and I just remember being so overwhelmed,
Yeah.
by the entire thing, and just like I said, the teachers were just not nice. They didn't understand me, and
Like, try harder.
I was having difficulty understanding why I was the way I was. So having these people basically make everything worse, of course I was going to develop some sort of,
Mhm.
anxiety, social anxiety, school anxiety.
Do you remember, did some of the pressure for medication come from the school, if you recall?
I don't remember. I do know that the doctor made that clear that, this will help in school. And
Yeah.
when he was telling my parents that, I needed Celexa. But like I said, I stayed on it for 4 years. I had really bad panic attacks at the time, those 4 years, but I was functioning. It would just be like I would have 3 or 4 weeks of severe debilitating panic attacks. And I actually developed a phobia of vomiting at the time,
Yep.
which is, I don't know where it came from, but it happened. And anytime I got any sort of stomach ache, I would just go into full-blown panic attacks. When I went off of the drug at 16, it was pretty easy to get off then. I don't remember why, but maybe my brain, I was still a kid, maybe my brain just hadn't been damaged yet. But I remember going off of it and feeling the best I had felt since I was like 10. Tons more energy. I felt happy. And I clearly didn't need the drug. Hindsight's 2020, but I just I look back at those years, and so many things could have gone differently, and
Yeah.
it's an unfortunate thing, but so many people have dealt with this, and I'm not the only one. That's something I keep telling myself over the years is, there's tons of people who have been through this, and it's unfortunate. It really is. It's sad. It's just a sad situation that we're at this point in this country.
Especially, not especially, but I do think especially with children, because there is no informed consent for a child. They can't, that goes through the adults who, as you said, are being gaslit into believing that if they're a good parent, they would do this for their struggling child. And that is how it's presented. That's how it
Absolutely.
was presented to me as a parent. I never did it for my kid. I'm so thankful that I did not, but the pressure was immense. The pressure to be a good mom, the pressure to be, for him to learn differently was so immense. So I feel for your mom and your parents having to sit there and, make these massive decisions for their child. And then I think about you from 11 to 16, like what's going on in an adolescent body during that time that was impacted by these medications negatively. And you said, when you were 16 you got off of it and it was relatively easy, and in my mind I'm thinking like, I wonder if it was easy because you had hormonal surges and your hormones were kind of picking up the slack here, trying to help you get through all of that. Plus you're probably more active at 16, like doing, I remember 16, it was fun.
Yeah,
There's a
sports.
lot of
Yep.
sports, and yes,
Yeah.
all of those things were happening simultaneously, to help your brain get through that time. Um,
Yeah, I do remember coming off pretty quickly at the time at 16, and I had no problem. And I've mentioned this in my fighting back videos that I felt unbelievable and unbelievable, good. And I would say 4 months after, 3 or 4 months later, I developed throat reflux. And then about 5 months after that, I started getting symptoms of Graves' disease. And I always think back, I'm like, did this drug do something
Yeah.
to my brain, to my body, that brought out all of these physical physical problems that have developed over the years? I mean, I don't know, but the throat reflux was bad. But then I got Graves about, I would say it was about 9 months to a year after I stopped the Celexa. And I had just gone back to school. I was up at boarding school at the time. And I started to get, I was sweating, like just profusely sweating, itching all over my body, migraines. They tested me for Lyme disease. It was negative. But then they ended up testing me for thyroid, and it came back positive. And both my sisters had actually also had Graves, and both had also taken psychiatric drugs.
Interesting.
Both my parents did not have Graves. No history of thyroid with them. So very strange.
Very.
And 2 months after the Graves diagnosis, so now we're up to December of 2006, I started to get horrible joint pain all over my body.
Yeah.
And this is when I became essentially paralyzed. Could not move. I was in excruciating pain. And they told me at the time that it was probably due to the drug I was on for Graves' disease. But looking back, I think that was when I got Lyme disease. There's so many things I wish I knew then, but you can't look back, and just it'll drive you crazy.
You were also a kid. You were
Yeah.
still a kid struggling with these pretty major disease states too,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So when we're kids, we're also reliant on the adults around us. That's how it works. Like we're not inquisitive to our own body. We leave that up to our parents and our care providers. So I mean, we can't go back and hold our childhood selves accountable for what we know today as adults, or
It's
to
true.
do something different.
It is true. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But I did have this severe episode of arthritis, and my parents were trying to figure it out. The doctors were trying to figure it out. And of course, my stupid fucking doctor at the time, psychiatrist, said, "Oh, he's under a lot of stress. We got to put him back on Celexa." So that was when I was put back on Celexa, and I remember the arthritis got better. It took maybe 4 or 5 weeks. It just slowly started to fade.
Mm.
I had issues over the year, like remaining high school years. I was back on Celexa, still had panic attacks, and 2011, I was done with high school. It was like summertime. I still had Graves' disease. Graves is something that I just dealt with. It was always there. It wasn't terrible. It was like, there's worse things to have, obviously, and I just dealt with it. It was just part of my life at the time, and I was like, talking to my mom. It was like summer 2011, and I was like, I don't want to be on psychiatric drugs my entire life. I don't know how I came to that realization, but I remember saying that to her, and she agreed, and that was when I started trying to taper. And this is when things got horrible. My thyroid levels, for whatever reason, every time I try to mess around with psychiatric drugs, my thyroid levels go way out of range. My body gets under intense stress, and it is just a horrible cycle of just bullshit, to say the least.
Yep.
But I kept being told by doctors that it was like fall of 2011 when I was doing this taper. You just have anxiety. It's just anxiety. Like, it's anxiety. I'm like, well, I've been fine. They're like, well, it's anxiety because you're coming off the drug. Well, I'm like, well, my thyroid levels are way out of range. Couldn't that be some?
Yeah.
Couldn't that have something to do with it? But it was always just, no, it's anxiety. So I get to December of that year, and my nervous system and my adrenal glands, everything just felt like it failed in my body. That was what it felt like. It was the worst I've probably ever felt in my life. And at this point, I became bedridden for a few months. Could not move. The most severe fatigue I've ever felt in my life. The stress of trying to come off of this drug and dealing with Graves, it was just not a good combination. And I remember my doctor saying something like, it's not the drug. You can alternate. You can go from, you can take 20 milligrams one day and then 10 the next day.
Oh my God.
It was something ridiculous like that. Like looking back, like that is so bad for your nervous system.
It's
So
I just
bad.
I can't even understand.
Like the silence has been broken right now. It's
I
so
can't.
bad.
I'm just sitting here so quiet. It's so incredibly asinine. Not only is it disproven in research, which is out there and has been out there. I mean, it's not like this was 70 years ago you're talking about here, Kevin, right? Okay.
Yeah.
But the idea that it's okay to play with that and to encourage people to play with that, knowing the mechanisms of action, right? The half-life of these drugs in the body and what they do, right? How they bind to to serotonin receptor sites. Oh my gosh, it's so incredibly illogical. And it was illogical then.
Yeah.
Um
And I think that, like I said, the Graves playing a part in this, and potentially Lyme disease.
Oh, sure.
It was too much for my body, and
God,
my
you
body
were
is
so young.
my
You're
body
18,
fell
right?
apart.
At this point, you're about 18.
I was
19.
a little older. I was 20, 21.
Okay.
But
All right.
still, for a 21-year-old to have to go through all of this, like,
Yeah.
talk about being robbed of,
Yep.
the best
And
times
this-
of your
Well,
life.
and your central nervous
Yeah.
system is still not developed, by the way, at this age
Yes.
yet. You're still
Yeah.
not quite there.
Yeah.
That's in your
So
mid-20s.
I went back up to my normal dose of Celexa when I became bedridden. They were like, okay, just stop, stop the taper. So I did that, and then my thyroid was so diseased that my parents took me up to a surgeon. Could barely walk into the place. That's how sick I was, and they came to the conclusion that the thyroid needs to come out. It is incredibly diseased. So we did make that decision to do a total thyroidectomy. This was March 21st of 2012. So the whole thyroid came out, and I had been back up on my Celexa dose for a few months, and I did start to heal a little bit. And I felt a little better. I started to actually go out more, and I was able to drive a little bit. That was sort of I still feel like I'm at the beginning parts of this entire story. That's how long the whole story is. And that summer I was like, I want to try again. I want to try to get off Celexa again. Same thing happened. Thyroid levels go out of range, become sick for months. Ended up switching over to Zoloft. But actually I tried about 3 or 4 other drugs before Zoloft. Ended up on Zoloft, and it was a little bit better than all the other ones I had tried. And I felt actually pretty good, but what happens with these drugs is you get the poop out effect. And that started happening 2 or 3 years after every drug. I would start the drug, and then a few years later I started feeling horrible again. And I started feeling worse than before I even started the drug. And then it's the gaslighting. It's like, this is just your anxiety disorder. I'm like, well, I didn't feel this awful before the drug. So how can you say that?
That's the whole, but can I just intervene? Because that's the whole thing. When it's different, like this isn't the way I felt the reason that I got on it. Suddenly I'm worse. Suddenly my symptoms are very different. Suddenly all these things, oh, it's just the return of symptoms. But it's not, because those symptoms aren't what I had. So how is that a return?
Mhm.
I didn't
Like,
have debilitating physical symptoms.
No,
right.
no.
I
Exactly.
didn't have akathisia. I
Mhm.
didn't have vertigo. I didn't have all these things
Right.
that developed with the drugs.
Right.
Um,
That doesn't even
and
make logical sense to say that, because we're not evaluating then what were the symptoms and the reasons that you got on this in the first place, are not the same as what's happening to you now. And it's a complete dismissal of, well, that doesn't seem right. This seems different, wildly different, worse
yeah,
than originating symptoms. Like, I don't know, like how we keep perpetuating that is, I don't know. I can't even, because I can't even keep perpetuating that idea, because it is so illogical to me.
yeah. I mean, it's just
And it is what we do all the time.
blood
The
money.
return of
I
symptoms.
mean,
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
really. Yeah, really.
like that's what it comes down to, in my opinion. It's just all about money, and it's not about growing as a society. It's about
Mhm.
money. It's about power. Um, do I think that all doctors are evil people? No, I don't. I think some of them have, I don't know how many, but some of them do have the right intentions. They want to help people. Um, but we are definitely not at the right place that we need to be
Mhm.
at all.
So here you are now, Kevin, on another titration journey, whatever, I don't know what word you want to put on it. With this effexor that you're on. And off air before we started, you and I were talking about the start of that for you, which was December of 23.
Yeah, the start of the taper. Yeah.
Start of the taper. So, what got you to a space then of going, okay, I'm going to try this again? As I'm assuming there's more events that happened in between,
Oh yeah.
this time
Oh yeah.
span, right?
I do want to jump ahead in the story to, so Zoloft ended up having that poop out effect,
Yep.
and I sort of spent about 2 or 3 years. I did have a few years of normalcy. It was about 23 to 26 where I actually got my life back, and I was playing hockey, I was working, I was doing normal things. Um, and then I would say 2017 I started to notice that I could not catch my breath. Debilitating shortness of breath. Um, and then it was like brain fog, and I had akathisia for so long, and I didn't know what it was.
Yeah.
Um, excuse me. I did not know what it was. I didn't know what akathisia was until probably 2 or 3 years ago, when I started to actually dive into, okay, what the fuck am I experiencing? But I'll get into that more. But I remember just being like, I don't want to mess around with this drug. I was like scared. It was a post traumatic stress
Mhm.
response at this point, where I was like, I don't want to taper. I don't want to try something else. So I'll just keep taking it, even though I feel horrible. And then we jumped to 2019, and doctor at the time said, we got to try something else. This is like, you're clearly, the Zoloft is not doing anything anymore. So I'm switched to Lexapro. And Lexapro was the worst drug I've ever taken in my life. I spent eight months straight in and out of the hospital, with severely high blood pressure, severe vertigo. The most debilitating, I mean, they were panic attacks, but this was beyond panic. This was something is going on in his body, my body, that is causing my blood pressure to skyrocket. And that's being caused from something that started with the Lexapro. And I also, this is when I discovered that I did actually have chronic Lyme disease. So I started to take an approach to handle that. And my microbiome just got completely shot because I tried antibiotic treatment, which was a terrible idea. And at the same time, trying to adjust the Lexapro. So yeah, 2019 was a complete disaster. Sickest I've ever been in my entire life. There was one point during the summer, I think I know the exact date because I'm weird like that, but September, so I think it was September 10th of 2019. I kept being told this whole summer by doctors that you were having, these are panic attacks. And while they're panic attacks because of the fucking drug. They're not panic attacks because I have panic disorder. Because I wasn't having these severe episodes before you put me on. Like, I felt awful on Zoloft, but I wasn't at this level of suffering.
There's never a but why. But why am I experiencing these intense, debilitating panic attacks? In the mental health world, there's never a but why. It's just, well, here's the diagnosis. That's why.
I remember being, I was screaming for help. This was a point, it was September 10th, and I was screaming my parent. I was like, something is wrong. This is, fucked up. Something's wrong. I need to go back to the hospital. I think I was in the hospital up over 50 times that summer. And every single time, it's just a panic attack. Every single time I went in there, they started to think of me as just like the crazy guy who comes in with panic attacks.
Yep.
Hypochondriac.
So
yep.
We're on our way to the hospital for the millionth fucking time. And my mom, I actually couldn't make it. I was like, Mom, you got to pull over. Like, I think I'm actually dying right now. Like, that's how awful I feel. And we're right by the firehouse. So she brings me into the fire station, and she's talking to the firefighters, and they have like a blood pressure cuff. They call an ambulance, but they put the cuff on me. And my blood pressure is 260 over 150.
Oh my gosh.
And I turned to my mom. I'm like, what is going on? I was like, this is absolutely insane. Like that these doctors are saying that this is just a panic disorder. That is just in my DNA. I just have panic attacks. I was like, what is going on? Like, I was like, I can't do anything. I can't drive a car. I'm literally confined to one room right now. The only rooms I knew that summer were my bedroom and in the fucking hospital rooms that I were in. And yeah, thinking back, it's a horrible time to think back on, but I'm so glad that I eventually, I think it was only about a month later, I switched to Effexor. And once I got onto Effexor, all of this horrible shit went away. Thank God. Still wasn't great on Effexor by any means, but it was not what I experienced on Lexapro at all. Lexapro was a different level of suffering that I did not know existed. So I was put on Effexor, and I definitely did gain some of my life back. But of course, the poop out happened again in 2023. And I developed severe vestibular migraines. night sweats,
Mhm.
all the side effects that you could probably have with Effexor. I had them, and I was waking up every morning just drenched in sweat. My wife is like, what is wrong with you? I'm like, it's the drug. Like, it's, I don't know what's going on, but I'm pretty sure this is a side effect of Effexor. And then it stopped working. I started to get all the same problems back, all the physical symptoms that I was experiencing. But this time I had vestibular migraines, which I never had in the past, and vertigo, and I ended up bedridden again. And this was September of 23. I think this is like the fourth or fifth time I just ended up in bed over a 12-year period. I'm trying to remember. I gained a little bit of progress those next few months, but then December hit. I tried going up on Effexor. I was like, maybe I'm not, maybe the dose isn't enough. And then I came to this realization. I was like, all right, I'm going to do everything in my power to get off these fucking drugs. And that was December 26th of 23. And since that date, I have been working at this for the fifth or sixth time. Mm-hmm. I was like, enough is enough. I was like, I don't care if I suffer every day the rest of my life. I'm not going to give any more fucking money to these companies that have fucked me up. I was like, I'm not doing it. You're not
willing to give any more of your life away either.
That too. Yeah. I mean, I've wasted, excuse me, sorry. So much of my life has been wasted, and it's, I don't like to feel sorry for myself. I don't like to complain, but it's a fact. It's, I've had years and years of my 20s taken from me, and some of my early 30s now, just robbed of quality life that I definitely could have been doing more productive things.
So I'm curious, Kevin. So this started for you at age 12 on Celexa. Okay.
Yep.
Fast forward now, you're in your 30s.
34. Yep.
34. Okay. 34 years old. So you got 20 years, right, of this on and off.
Yep.
In that entire time, which you were a psychiatric patient for a very, very large chunk of that time, right?
Yeah.
Okay. At any point, did you have providers or you yourself, start a conversation that got shot down on the idea that this could all be coming from antidepressants and anti-anxiety meds? Was that someone who holistically, a practitioner who goes, okay, let's go back to age 12 and see where this started? Was there ever a conversation about these psychiatric drugs are fucking with your health? They're messing with your central nervous system. They're creating symptoms you never had. Was that part of a discussion at any point in this 25
not from
years?
Doctors, not from any doctors. My mom hates medication. She's had a long history of it, not herself, but witnessing what these drugs have done to me, to her own mother who had MS and was addicted to all these pain meds.
Yeah.
So my mom hates meds, and she always said over the years, like, this is probably, the drugs are probably causing a lot of this. Yeah. She has said it to me, and we've had conversations about it. Yeah. But I think at the same time, she feels so much guilt.
Sure.
About being, me being put on at 12. She has so much guilt about it. And I'm like, Mom, it's not your fault. You're a victim in this too.
Yeah.
But no, not from doctors, not from any doctors.
Because there's a common denominator that just floats throughout your entire history.
Yeah.
And it's the presence of some form of an SSRI, SNRI. You've got a benzo on there now, right? Like it exists. It's
Yeah.
always been there for the most part.
Yeah.
On and off, different drugs, different trials. Then you got medical pieces that float in, right?
And the medical stuff, like the physical stuff, just makes it all worse. The Lyme, the thyroid, trying
Yeah.
to regulate my levels, and
Yeah.
that's definitely something that is just added to it. It's just I got to figure it out. I got to figure out a way to handle it the best I can.
Mm-hmm.
When did you put the pieces together, like, entirely, that my truth is this, it's not what everyone else is saying?
It's a very good question, and I think that
He's going to know the date, aren't you? You're going to know the date.
I know
It
a
was
lot of
noon
dates.
I
on a
know you
Monday.
do. I'm very jealous for this right now because I can't remember shit from the last 20 years of my menus. So I'm sitting here going, damn, good for you.
It's almost
I'm glad you have that, Kevin. Of all the other shit in your life, I'm glad you have the ability to retroactively go back.
it is a nice thing to have. It's just it's also kind of a curse because it's like I remember every little detail, and that just
Yeah.
contributes to this
does.
PTSD.
It's true. It's true.
Mhm.
That's probably why I don't have as much of that because I can't remember anything. Yeah.
Yeah, the realization I don't have a date, but I think that there were many times over the years that I thought, maybe this is just I need to like really jump the gun and just try to figure out a way to really get off of these drugs. But I think it was this last flare up in 2023 with the vertigo and the migraines and the effects are having the poop out effect. I think that was probably it, especially December when I tried to go up and I felt like I was on fucking speed.
Yep.
And that was when I was really like, okay, what am I doing here? Like, this is ridiculous. And I've said it to, the past 6 months, 8 months, whatever, I've gained a lot of my life back. That's another story that we can get into, but I've gained a lot of my life back over the past 6 to 8 months because I haven't touched my dose of Effexor since April of last year. I'm down to 37.5.
Yep.
I went way too fast in the beginning, had debilitating panic attacks, akathisia, But right now I'm at a point where I'm still suffering, but I'm functioning, if that makes sense.
Yep.
The suffering has come down, but there are still days where I suffer horribly. Two days ago, I had my first panic attack since December or November, and it was debilitating. And my nervous system, my limbic system, is just injured. That's what it comes down to. That I mean, that is the realization that I've come to, is that I have drug injury. From years and years and years of just different drugs and the length of time that I was on these drugs. And I'm not saying the Lyme isn't a part. I'm sure Lyme is a part of it too. I'm sure that there's other things at play, but I do think that the main problem for me personally, the main problem has been the drugs. And I'm still healing. Every day I'm trying to figure out a way to just heal. How can I get through today feeling the best that I can possibly feel? Like I said, some days are a lot worse than other days. But the functioning part has gotten better. I'm able to function. Got back into some working and finally got my own house, and my family's obviously thrilled about that. Because I was literally in my parents' basement a year ago, suffering, like just debilitating symptoms. I mean, this was obviously the acute withdrawal phase, but it was also just, I think just like I said, limbic system injury,
Yeah. Kevin, how do you know when you're ready to go down again? How will you know when you're in that spot?
I've been asked that many times from family members, from people on social media. It's tough to know, because it's like, is what I'm feeling now because I'm still on the drug, or is it because I went too fast and my nervous system is still healing?
Yep.
Or is it both? Is it a little bit of both?
Mm-hmm.
I think I'll just know in my gut, in my
There you
heart,
go.
when it's time to make
Mhm.
that jump.
That's
And I do not feel that yet. Could it happen in the next month, 2 months, 6 months? Yeah, I think it could.
Yeah.
But when I do start the rest, because going from 187.5 to 37.5 in 2 or 3 months is completely insane. I think we
Yeah.
can all agree.
As
Yeah.
deep prescribers, we would say, yes,
Yeah.
Kevin.
I think, and I think Dr. Mark Horowitz would probably.
Mark's pissed at you. Let's just be
Yeah,
honest. Like,
yeah.
he'd be like, "Did you read my book? Damn it!" Right?
I actually talked to him about a year ago. Actually, I talked
He's
to
in his
him.
own struggle with this.
He is.
He is, and
Yeah.
Mhm.
but he's got the right approach, and he knows exactly what he's doing.
Mhm.
And I do think that, he would probably be like, why did you do that? But I think I
we've
do
all
think
done it.
that at the time I was just pissed off. And I was
Yes.
like, I'm gonna just start jumping down really quick because I don't want to take this shit anymore. That was my mentality at the time.
Oh,
It
yeah.
was not the right mentality to have by any means, but a lot of, like you said, a lot of us, I think, have done that, or they're pissed off and they're like,
Yep.
I just want off of this shit.
I feel
Yep.
that to my soul. Yes. Mhm.
And when I got to 37.5, I was like, this is probably a good point to just stop for a while and to
Yeah.
let myself start to heal again.
Yep.
But yeah, that is my story, and currently I deal with akathisia every single day.
Could you describe that just a little bit for people who might be new to the term? And I know we talked about how it's so difficult to put words to it, but I think we need to have discussion about it a little bit.
So for me personally, akathisia is a constant urge to move parts of my body and apply pressure to parts of my body. I get it really bad right here. I get it in my gut area, and it's a lot of doing this, tapping,
Mm-hmm.
and it's just this urge. I can't really describe it other than this intense urge to. I have to put pressure there, and then at nighttime it's the pacing. I have to pace, and I pace back and forth, sometimes for hours at night.
Yeah.
Some nights are worse than others. Some days are worse than others. Like I said, it's very up and down right now. But that's better than just being down.
Yeah.
So, yeah, the akathisia is. It can get so bad that I'm like, I'm doing this while I'm walking, and I'm like, I can't stop.
Yep.
I cannot stop what I'm doing right now, and my wife tries to help. She'll do anything to try to like calm my nervous system, just like rub my back or like just anything to try to just calm myself. But at the end of the day, it's like akathisia is so terrible because it doesn't seem to have many what's the right word? There doesn't seem to be many things that help akathisia.
Yeah.
And that's why so many people have suffered from it. And there's been what seems like a pretty high suicide rate with akathisia, which is terrible thing. And
I want to point out one quick thing about akathisia, because it was historically only talked about with antipsychotics and possibly like benzodiazepines.
Yep.
And we're talking about it with SSRIs and SNRIs, like the typical things that most people are prescribed. So I think this is helpful in this conversation because it can happen in any class of medication.
Yes.
Any
It,
psychiatric drug, yeah.
any
Yes.
psychiatric drug this can happen to. And so when we just isolate it into one, then people who are suffering with it are like, that can't be that because this is only for this classification or that. But we're
Mhm.
here to say it does not discriminate.
Yeah, not
Yeah.
at all. It's an equal opportunity employer
Mm.
across any class of drug, which
Mhm.
a lot of people don't like to believe. Um,
Yeah.
but we're here to
No,
tell you it's a
I've
thing.
absolutely had it on just the SSRIs and
Oh yeah, you talk about it all the time on your channels. Mhm.
yeah, yep. I do take, like I said, I take a low dose of Klonopin right now, but I've seemed to come I come off and on benzos fine. It's very strange because I have all these problems with the SSRIs, but I think maybe that's just because the length of use has not been the same.
Mhm.
Sure.
Um,
And you didn't
Sure.
start it when you were 11
exactly,
or
and
12 or whatever it was.
that's
Yeah.
a key point in all of this.
Mhm.
I did develop also. I don't know if you're familiar with mast cell activation syndrome, but that is another thing that I've developed over the past year or two. Histamine intolerance.
Mhm.
I believe that all of these things are from the drugs.
Mhm.
I 100% believe that, and I don't need a doctor to tell me otherwise
Yeah.
or tell
Right.
me that I'm wrong because I know better than the doc. I mean, I know what I'm feeling.
Yeah. You've lived in your
Yep.
body for a very long
Yep.
time.
You can't go to a doctor and say, "Hey, this is what I'm feeling," and then he knows you better in what 20 minutes. He knows you better than you know yourself. That's not how life works. You got to trust yourself and you got to be your own doctor.
Mhm. Your intuition is big, and I think probably because you started this when you were so young, again, outsourcing, your information to other people, that when you got to a space where you were tapping into your own intuition, right? You're like connecting dots and, putting it all together. Um, that's an interesting time because that's when you're like, I want off of this and I want off of it yesterday. I got to that space. I remember that.
Yep.
And I think this is where people then start gaslighting you more. Well, if you feel better, what would it be like for you if you were off of it? You know what I mean? Like what all these gaslighting conversations that we have about reasons to stay on. Well, in your case, you weren't feeling better. I wasn't either. I was feeling like a numbed out rock. Like that's what I was feeling. Um, but it's interesting because I think when we come out of the fog and we tap into our intuition again and we make these connections, and that's when we're like, enough. I
Yeah.
have had it
Mhm.
enough.
Mhm.
And one
So
last thing I want to mention is
yeah.
that I I feel right now, I feel the best I've felt in a long time. And I'm at the lowest dose I've been in since I was 16 years old. So, I mean, what does that tell you?
Right.
I
Right.
Yeah.
feel the best I've felt, as awful as some days are, and as awful as akathisia is, and as awful as all these things are still,
Yeah.
I do feel the best I've felt in that long. Um,
Good.
I have, like I said, I've had years where I've been okay, but there's always that poop out effect with these drugs, and that's how they get you. It's like,
Mhm.
you'll feel good for those 2 years, you'll feel decent, and then you feel worse than before you even started.
Yeah.
Yep.
Forever consumer.
Forever consumer.
Yeah. Well,
All
this is a
right.
good spot, I think, for
Yes.
us to wrap up because we've got like about a minute left before we the whole
Yeah.
world implodes and we need to do way too much editing that Terry just does not want to do because she's tasked with that. So we are gonna let's wrap up here, Kevin. Thank you
Thank
for coming on the show and telling the world your story.
Yeah.
We are the
Thank you
Gaslit
guys.
Truth Podcast, and make sure now, Kevin, we will tag all of we'll get your socials in you've got a YouTube channel and you're on TikTok. Fighting Back 203 is your TikTok handle. I don't know what your YouTube
Yeah.
one is.
I think it's the same. It might
Is
just
it?
be fighting
Okay.
back.
I
It
don't
might
always
just be
watch you on
fighting back.
TikTok. Except for
Yeah.
that like 12 hours where we didn't have TikTok and then it
Yeah,
was back,
that is
right?
Yeah,
So,
yeah, that's
but
true.
you can find us anywhere that you listen to podcasts. We are the Gaslit Truth. If you want to send us your Gaslit Truths, you can email us at thegaslittruthpodcast@gmail.com. And please make sure you rate us, tell us how you feel, give us all the stars.